I went to Ukraine a few months ago, and I went to church every morning. Jesus Christ said, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you will not have life in me. And that's why I have life. I went to Ukraine. Where is the Catholic Church? So I go down, I'm in Lviv. Now Lviv is like a Vienna city. It's in the north of Ukraine. And everybody said, you can't go there. It's a terrible place. Everything's busted up, bombs. But actually, the whole of west of Ukraine is a paradise. The whole of the east of it is murder. But actually, it's a mixture of the both, and they seem to be able to carry on. But as I say, when I went there for a week, nearly 2 weeks, I couldn't. If somebody hadn't told me there was a war going on, I wouldn't have any idea. So at the moment, because what happened at the Council of Brest, they sent 2 monks down to the Vatican. In the Church of the Dormition in the Vatican, they signed some documents saying, we, the Ukrainians, are going to return to the Catholic fold, and we're all going to become Catholics again. So they were called Uniates. They come back into the Catholic Church. So they come back to Russia, or rather to Ukraine, and Ukraine said, dun, 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 okay, we're all coming back, all come to Constantinople. But what happened was, well, just as a passing, it's worth noting that the Protestant Reformation engine was money. And you can see this unfolding in Ukraine, because what happened in Ukraine, the rich monasteries said, no, if Rome takes over Ukraine, our rich monasteries will have to give the money to the Pope. So we're not going to join up. We want to be independent. So in other words, what happened was sort of half Ukraine went back to the Catholics, to the Uniates, and half them were still listened to Constantinople. Is you have the Uniates, they're called Greek Uniates. That's the so-called Rome Grammars, actually. Then you have the Polish Uniates, so they have the two Catholic, but they both listen to the Pope. Then you have the Autocephalous, one here, the local Ukrainian Russian Church, and then you have the Russian Church that listens to Constantinople. Then you have the Ukrainian Church that listens to Moscow. So you've got about 5 churches, and in between, of course, you've got a few Protestants and things. So it's a bit haphazard. And of course, one of the problems is that when Russia was controlled, they took over the Catholic Church for about 50, 60 years. All became Russian Orthodox churches. So now, since 1921, okay, they had a bit of freedom, and they're building the situation up. And when I went there, they're building all sorts of new churches, and the thing was budgeting and bright. But just out, by the way, so when I went there, as I said, I went to church every day. And when you go into a Russian church, into a Ukrainian church, it's very difficult to tell the difference between the Catholics and the Orthodox. Why? Because they're exactly the same. They've been together so long that they just about the only difference is in the Catholic Church you have seats. The Russian Orthodox or the Ukrainian Orthodox, they don't have seats, so they have to stand up, and they have these long ceremonies. But a lot of the rites and the thing, and the big thing is you have here, somebody mentioned, but you have the icon. Icons, here's an icon, no? Icon means just picture in Greece. And icon, the Russians or the Greeks, basically, and also the Russians, they say that you can look at a picture and you can see God. So when the Russians or the Greek Orthodox are painting icons, they have to pray, and they have to be fasting, and so that they can paint that, so that you can see in the icon, see heaven. So they say, in other words, they say, the Greeks pray with their eyes open, the Latins pray with their eyes shut. So they say they can see God in the trees and basically that's a harking back to the animism of the ancient people. It's like the Chinese. The animism is basically the Daojiao, and the others is Dao Chen. So anyway, they believe. So if you go into a Catholic church, you have what is known as the iconostasis. So you have the altar, And then in front of the altar you have the stasis, it's a wall, the icon wall. So it's the same as the ancient Jews. They had a kind of a wall between the Holy of Holies and the holy place. And we all know that when Jesus Christ died, there was a crack in the wall between the Holy of Holies, which symbolizes heaven, and the holy places, which symbolizes the earth. In other words, earth became heaven. So, but the point is, the Russians have still got this iconostasis. So when you go to the Catholic Church, normally in the West, we worship the Christ in the tabernacle. But they kiss an icon. They go up to the icon because they say they can see heaven through the eyes of the icons. They can see heaven in the icon.